All right, so we are live on YouTube now. So I know we're a little bit late, so let's just get started. Um, for today's call, we're not going to talk that much about 1.9 because we've already talked so much about it in the past two calls. But the big thing to know about 1.9 is that we're not using simple schema anymore. We're using the new NPM simple schema. So check out the docs that we have on that. And we're getting rid of collection hooks, and we have a new catalog collection to use, and there's more details on that in our very detailed changelog. So check that out. And today we're going to be spending all our time talking about GraphQL that we've already started development on in 1.10. There's a PR for that. So let's just get started with that. Eric, do you want to take the reins?
Sure. Yeah, so overall we are slowly, maybe not too slowly, but carefully rolling out GraphQL support within the Reaction app. This is sort of a taste of future plans for the way of interacting with the server, kind of better separation between client and server, and moving more toward having separate client components and client apps that communicate through GraphQL. And so what we've basically been doing so far is just trying to implement some initial GraphQL support and a /GraphQL endpoint within the existing Reaction app. This is very alpha stuff. This is not really so far documented all that well, or something that we're really putting a stamp of support on as far as the schema. So, if you want to play around with it, that's cool, but it's going to be very much in flux for a period of months, probably. So yeah, I was prepared to kind of demo what we have so far. I didn't really prepare much in terms of explaining. I see Spencer joined. I don't know if you have anything to add as far as the plans of GraphQL, or an introduction to my demoing what we have.
No real update as to the plans, I would say, other than to say this is initially more of an exploratory spike. We do believe GraphQL is probably the direction we're going to be going, but I think it'd be a little premature to speculate as to whether or not or when any of this will be done or ready for production use.
Yep.
But it's exciting.
So yeah, explore, use at risk, feedback, use at your own risk. I should give feedback, that kind of thing. But don't go relying on it in production or anything like that.
For anybody who wants to see, there's all the stuff is well documented in tickets, and you can see what our plans for and what the discussions about everything. So if you are interested, there's a lot of reading you can do to see what's up there.
Yep. And we're being, there's some closed door discussion, but we're trying to kind of keep most things out in the open, and kind of create decision records and things like that to have clarity around what we're doing and why. I'm going to just go ahead and give a little demo of this, which hopefully works. Okay, so this is just a running Reaction app. This is on my branch, but this will be merged into, I think, probably 1.11 sometime today, or 1.10. I'm not sure where we're at on that, but the first thing to explain is just overall me see if I can. Is that there we go. It's being slow. Is where this lives in imports. There's a new core plugin folder called GraphQL. It's not really a plugin per se, but this was a convenient place to put it to keep it out of the root level. Could move still. So this server folder in the GraphQL plugin is pretty much everything related to GraphQL. If you're familiar with GraphQL, it'll be somewhat understandable to you. There's the concept of schemas and resolvers, or a schema and resolvers. So these are separated schemas, but they're merged into one during the process. They're not using the .graphql extension right now, but that may change. We may. It's just a little tricky within Meteor to do that, but if we figure that out, we may switch over to that. So those are just typical, GraphQL schema language. The resolvers are arranged in somewhat by which area or plugins they relate to. But within that, they follow exactly the pattern of the way that the resolvers nest, I guess, in GraphQL. So, mutations and queries are root level things, and then like how to deal with a count. And then there's various specific resolvers within that. So this, for example, is a resolver that's only partially implemented, but would return the shop for an account, the related shop. So I'm not going to go too much into how that's implemented. You can just take a look at it, and it's still in flux to some degree. The main place where the actual server is set up is in this index, and this is using eventually, you'll be able to see here, is using Apollo Server Express, Apollo Server Core, those kinds of things. So if you're familiar with Apollo. And then we're just exposing it using the Meteor Web App Connect handlers, which will bind the /GraphQL and /GraphEQL routes to this server. Yeah, that's about it. And these do have tests. We'll be aiming for full test coverage. These are Jest tests. So along with this, we're doing a bunch of work to get Jest working again inside of the running Jest tests inside of this repo. Now, as for the actual more interesting part of this, if I can find my screen here. All right, so this is localhost 3000 GraphEQL. There's an I in there. The GraphQL without the I is the endpoint that actually takes the post requests. GraphQL, if you're not familiar with it, is a standard thing in the GraphQL ecosystem that helps you kind of make queries and explore the schema. So if you fire it up, you'll get this automatically on, if you're on a branch that has that plugin. You can go to docs and from there go through and explore the entire schema. So this is all going to be pretty well self-documented through descriptions. They don't all have descriptions yet, but I can try to. Now it's frozen. Okay, so this one has a small description. I think there's really dragging in speed here now. I think there's maybe some mutations that have more documentation. So here's an example of documentation for this mutation. So you'll be able to pretty well explore all the way down through every mutation and query and see a description here to give you an idea of what it returns or what it's all about. And then we're using relay style connections for returning result sets and paginating them. So we're trying to be compatible with relay. This doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be writing front end things using relay, but it's the most strict of the front end data loaders. So we decided to support that, but you could still use something like Apollo Client or really a lot of different things with relay style cursors. So these are mutations. If I go to administrator's query, for example, you can see that it takes these relay style arguments to do pagination, sorting, that kind of thing. And it returns a connection. Our connection, this is relay style connections have edges and page info. We additionally have nodes. If you request it, you can get just the nodes and total count as an integer. So as an example of a simple query, we have a viewer query. One other thing to explain here is that when you're accessing this graphical through Meteor here, you get automatic recognition of who you are logged in as on another tab. So if you were to open the normal reaction on another tab and log in as different users, this query here will use that same token as your authentication. So viewer here, I should be do like ID and name. So yeah, so I have a user. This means I am authenticated. The viewer just returns the account for you, the logged in person. Now there's also an accounts or account query that takes an ID. So I can get the same thing that viewer returns by doing something like that. And then you could do that for a different account. Now I should be able to also do shop within here and get the ID of that. So this is the shop that my account is associated with. Now notice that these IDs are not the Mongo IDs. We are following the GraphQL guidelines and obscuring those somewhat and making them globally unique. So there is some, like there's a very simple function you can run a Mongo ID through to go to and from these IDs. And it may be that we'll expose a mutation to help you do that, or it may just be that we'll provide those functions and you could include them in front-end code to do it on that end. If you're kind of bridging both worlds and using some old code and some new code through GraphQL. But within GraphQL, everything uses this style of ID. So now if I wanted to take that shop, this part I'm pretty sure is going to work. I should be able to go down even further, get all the administrators' names for that shop. Sorry. So this is where it's a connection. So like I said, you can get nodes directly in a connection. Sorry, typing the wrong things here. So this is just a simple way of getting the list back. You'll just get it in the node, an array in the nodes. But if you want to do more pagination, or if you're using Relay, the way it would do it is to get edges back, which have both the node, we'll just do name again, and or I'll do ID as well as a cursor for that particular document. So this is a little bit more complicated. Each node is basically wrapped in this object that gives you a cursor as well. And the cursor, again, is just an opaque ID that you shouldn't really care what it means. But you can use it for pagination. Now, in addition to the edges, I can get some pagination info. Such as the start cursor, the end cursor, the has next page and has previous page booleans. And that is all standard Relay style cursor connections. So this is just some additional information you can get. Using all that, you could implement pagination, whereby you could say, you could pass some additional information to administrators here and say, for example, I want to get only the one, this is a little bit of a contrived example, but I've got this admin one here as the first result. I want to get the first one results after that cursor. So it should just return, only the second node, and it does. So that's basically, how it's all working so far. There isn't too much more implemented than what I've shown here. We're going to start moving much quicker on implementing these now that a lot of the groundwork is laid. But so far, just a few of these account mutations and queries are either fully or partially implemented. And over the next few weeks, that'll increase. The other thing to just show quickly is that we have support in the app now for try to get rid of that bot thing. Yeah, for having a dev server that you run alongside or instead of the Meteor server. Currently, once this is merged, it will be npm run dev server to do that. And the files for that are in the .reaction folder dev server. That again could change, but that's where they are for now. This is very similar to what I showed the Meteor server doing, the same create Apollo server thing. This is happening in a pure node script, so it's not at all dependent on Meteor. Now the downside of that is that we are mocking the methods and queries to some degree. So this, you'll get, if you're working on resolvers or doing anything playing around with this, you might want to run this to much more quickly get restarts and play around with things. But then at some point you're going to want to run it through Meteor, to determine the actual functionality without any mocks is working properly. As you can see here, it listens and serves GraphQL on 3030, which I believe I have up here in the other tab. So this is the same thing. It should work pretty much the same, except for you'll notice that when I do any of the queries, I'm going to get some mock information back. So it doesn't really help you test that part of it, but it can help you kind of iterate more quickly on some of the other resolver logic and things like that. And if you need to add mocks for that, they're in this mock meteor folder. Everything should be relatively understandable in there. Yeah, I think that's about all that I was going to demo, unless anyone needs to ask any questions about it. Those of you on the call. Oh, were you talking, Brent? You're muted.
I was talking to myself, but are there any questions in the chat, in the YouTube chat before we?
We don't have any questions in the YouTube chat. The YouTube chat seems pretty quiet today.
Okay, doke.
All right. Well, that's GraphQL.
Thanks a lot, Eric. That was really great. I feel like I learned some stuff. I've been creating tickets for this, so.
Well, it's changing daily, so.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this week, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks.